Welcome to the Deep Dive, the only show that takes a massive stack of sources and maps out the evolution of a cultural phenomenon so you don't have to wade through 40 years of continuity yourself.
And today, we are definitely going deep.
We are diving shell first into arguably the weirdest and most enduring comic franchise in history, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
It truly is a spectacular property. I mean, when you lay out the timeline from 1984 to today, what you see isn't continuity. It looks like narrative whiplash.
Whiplash is the perfect word for it.
Yeah, we're talking about a franchise that successfully jumps from a dark, violent parody to a billion-dollar slapstick toy machine, only to then continuously reinvent itself by swinging back to those gritty roots.
And yet the core concept for mutant brothers, ninjas, a rat sensei, and an obsession with pizza is just intrinsically cool. It always works.
It always works. But the genius is its commercial adaptability.
Yeah.
That's the real story here.
So our mission today is to take all that source material, the comics, the cartoons, the film cycles, and track these radical shifts in tone, in core mythology, and character dynamics.
We're really tracing the journey across 4 major eras, right?
Exactly. We'll start with the dark original comic roots, then the radical commercial pivot of the 1987 cartoon.
Then the serious recentering that happened with the 2003 series, a big swing back.
And finally, the constant, often contradictory reboots of the modern post-Viacom era. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. But before we dive into the murky sewer water of continuity, we should probably establish the consistent archetypes. Because no matter how wildly the mythology changes, the 4 brothers remain recognizable.
That's a great point. They always retain those core character functions across all platforms.
Right, so you have Leonardo, the skilled, disciplined leader, always rocking the blue mask and wielding twin katanas. He is, in almost every version, the anchor.
The stoic one. Then there's Donatello, the intellectual, the gadget guru, easily identified by his purple mask and his bow staff.
He is consistently the brains, the scientist. He's the one who tries to leverage technology and ingenuity over, pure brute force.
Right. And then you have my personal favorite, Raphael. He's the hot-tempered muscle, wielding those twin sai and the signature red mask.
What's fascinating about Raphael, though, is that his personality is the most prone to massive, radical, tonal shifts depending on the era. I mean, he can be a vicious anti-hero.
Or a sarcastic comedian who breaks the fourth wall.
Exactly. It shows the elasticity of the franchise's characterization right there in one character.
And finally, Michelangelo, the perpetual heart of the team, the fun-loving jokester. He's got the orange mask and nunchucks.
The weapon, we should point out, that is most often censored or swapped out for grapple hooks or
other safe alternatives depending on the country or the era's safety standards. It's amazing.
It really is. So this quartet, this core 4, they provide the baseline stability needed for the entire shell game of shifting lore that we're about to get into.
So to understand the massive swings the franchise took, you really have to begin in the absolute darkness of the 1984 original.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't meant for global licensing. It was a black and white, oversized indie comic born out of a joke between creators Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird.
Okay, let's unpack this conception as a parody, because that is so central to the entire origin. Our source material makes it abundantly clear that they weren't attempting to launch a media empire.
Not at all. They were intentionally mocking the dominant, grim and gritty superhero comics of the time, particularly the stuff coming out of Marvel and DC.
And the main target, the foundational target, was Marvel's Daredevil.
It was. And the parallels are not subtle, they're intentional. Daredevil's origin, for anyone who doesn't know, involves him being blinded by radioactive material while saving an old man from a truck.
Which leads to his unique senses and his training by this martial arts master named Stick.
Exactly. And the Turtles are a direct dark reflection of this. They are altered by radioactive material, the very same canister, it's implied. And their sensei, Splinter, is a direct, deliberate play on Daredevil's sensei, Stick.
Stick, Splinter, it's right there.
It's right there. Even the Foot Clan is an obvious loving mockery of the Hand Clan, which is the mystical order of ninjas in Daredevil's mythology.
So the foundational elements, the mutation, the training, the secretive crime syndicate, were all just dark reflections of Marvel's street-level heroes.
It's a beautifully layered joke. And I love the anecdote about the naming choice, which really shows their commitment to absurdity.
Oh yeah, they considered traditional Japanese names for ninjas,
But Laird pushed back. He thought that naming them after Italian Renaissance artists, Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo, was, and this is a quote, just quirky enough to fit the concept.
It's perfect. It injects this layer of art history absurdity into the subterranean martial arts action.
That quirkiness actually helped launch the business side. I mean, speaking of the original tone and the business roots, this was a true DIY success story.
Totally. Eastman and Laird founded Mirage Studios in 1984. They printed the very first run of 3,000 copies using a small tax refund and a loan from Eastman's uncle. I think it was, what, $1,000?
Something like that, yeah. And the fact that it sold out almost immediately, needing reprints and leading to national distribution, was the surprise success that propelled them from niche parody to an actual business entity.
But the conflict underpinning this success was anything but lighthearted. We need to highlight the sheer darkness of the core conflict in those comics, the cycle of revenge.
This is so central to the original Mirage mythology and explains the ruthlessness of their early actions. It's not a kid's story.
Not at all. It's a classic feudal drama. The feud starts when Hamato Yoshi and Oroku Nagi, both members of the Foot Clan in Japan, become rivals for the affection of a woman named Tang Shen.
And when Nagi ruthlessly murders Tang Shen, Yoshi slays Nagi in retaliation. It's brutal.
Then Orokusaki, Nagi's younger brother, adopts the mantle of the Treader, travels to America, and seeks vengeance against Yoshi, culminating in Yoshi's death and Splinter's mutation.
That narrative arc is just steeped in blood and fatality. And this is a crucial distinction. In the original Mirage continuity, the Turtles and Splinter were assassins, not just heroes.
Right. They weren't just defending the city. They were trained for one purpose.
They were trained specifically to kill Shredder. And once Shredder was defeated and killed in that very first issue, they didn't magically adopt a thou shalt not kill rule.
No, they were constantly engaged in lethal combat, a massive deviation from the friendly cartoons that followed decades later.
So while they were fundamentally a parody of superhero tropes, they treated the stakes and the violence with genuine severity.
The other defining trait of these early comics was their immediate, almost frantic adoption of a fantasy kitchen sink approach. They realized the potential was endless.
Oh, they absolutely threw caution to the wind. Within the first 10 issues, they introduced time travel, robots, aliens, and interdimensional travel. It got weird, fast.
You see alien races like the Utrums, who are the original benign, brain-like aliens who, well, they inspired the design of Krang later on.
And characters like the Fugitoid, Professor Zayton Honeycutt.
The Fugitoid's introduction is a perfect example of this early expansion. His consciousness was transferred to a robot body after being struck by lightning. As you do.
Of course. And he was pursued relentlessly by the Tricerians, a race of militaristic, dinosaur-like aliens, and the Federation, all because he possessed the schematics for a revolutionary teleportal device.
So the entire cosmos was suddenly interested in the Turtles' subterranean world.
That shows the franchise's adaptability right out of the gate. But before they became the massive mainstream phenomenon, the comics took one final, shocking detour in the 90s. The Image Comics deviation.
The grimdark era.
The grimdark era, exactly. Fans either love it or hate it.
Right. Before the cartoon took over and sweetened everything, Raphael's story went to some shockingly dark places. What exactly happened when the creative control briefly shifted to Image Comics for Volume 3 in 1996?
It was a conscious effort to return to and then far exceed the original violent roots. They wanted to prove the Turtles could be mature again, but they kind of went too far.
How so?
It became known for its sheer brutality. Raphael's face was mangled and scarred in an explosion, requiring him to wear an eye patch for much of the run. He even briefly took over the Foot Clan, wearing a version of Shredder's armor.
And the other brothers weren't spared either. This is the era where Donatello suffered near-fatal injuries, right?
Yes. He was shot and dropped out of a helicopter. It turned him into a literal cyborg, essentially an amputee who was confined to cybernetic armor and needed constant repair.
And Leonardo lost a hand.
Lost a hand in a fight with a giant lizard monster, forcing him to replace it with a retractable blade.
So the intention was to show the real consequences of their life of violence.
It was a very stark, brutal contrast to the live-action films and the concurrent cartoons. But this volume, it only lasted 23 issues before it was abruptly canceled.
So it didn't work.
Its failure proved that while the Turtles could handle dark content, There was a limit to how much physical damage and psychological trauma the audience wanted to see inflicted upon these characters. It served as a cautionary tale about extreme tonal shifts.
Okay, so if the Mirage comics were the rebellious, gritty prototype, and the Image era was the bleak, failed experiment.
Then the 1987 animated series was the radical commercial transformation that not only saved the property from niche obscurity, but turned it into a global multi-billion-dollar brand.
This is where the core mythology was scrubbed clean and painted neon green.
The shift from black and white indie violence to Saturday morning color was purely commercial, and that makes the story of the commercial catalyst so fascinating. It wasn't driven by an artistic desire for a cartoon.
No, it was driven by a licensing agreement. That's the crucial pivot point. A licensing agent named Mark Friedman secured a deal with Playmates Toys, who saw massive potential.
But Playmates insisted that a cartoon be produced first to support the toy line. That's the key.
The cartoon was simply an elaborate 65-episode commercial for the action figures.
And that mercantile origin story translated into an undeniable, staggering commercial success.
Yeah.
I mean, the sources confirm the massive scale. Playmates sold about $1.1 billion worth of Turtles toys between 1988 and 1992 alone.
$1 billion in the early 90s?
That volume made them one of the best-selling toy lines ever at the time. It instantly cemented the need for a lighthearted, family-friendly, merchandise-driven tone.
It's astonishing to realize that the fundamental elements we associate with the mainstream brand, the friendly tone, the catchphrases, were all concocted by a marketing machine.
The sources name-check the creative team, Jerry Sachs, John Schulte, Carl Aronian, who developed the defining, friendly tone, creating slogans like "Heroes in a Half Shell."
And the iconic battle cry, "Cowabunga." The writers just adopted those terms to make the show instantly approachable for children.
That is the sound of softening the product for mass consumption. When we look at the character adaptations for a younger audience, the shifts are just dramatic, particularly for Raphael.
Oh, yeah. In the gritty comics, he was the hot-tempered, violent muscle who often acted alone. In the 1987 cartoon, he was fundamentally rewritten.
He became the sarcastic comedian, often leaning on the fourth wall to provide commentary. His intensity was largely replaced with cynicism and humor, making him palatable for a younger audience.
And Michelangelo became the archetype of the goofy, fun-loving party animal, obsessed with experimenting with bizarre, outlandish pizza toppings. The pizza obsession, which was a minor detail, became a signature cultural touchstone.
It did. And as you mentioned earlier, his weapon, the nunchucks, had to be replaced with a grappling hook later in the series due to network censorship issues. The turtle line, they called it.
The turtle line. That censorship point is critical, though, because it shows the systemic pressure of adapting the ninja theme for children globally.
The most famous example is the UK censorship, where the word ninja was deemed too violent.
Which led to the mandatory name change to Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, TMNT, across all media in the United Kingdom and much of Europe.
It's wild. But beyond the Turtles themselves, the introduction of Shredder's new henchmen, Bebop and Rocksteady, is maybe the most significant structural change made specifically for marketability.
They weren't in the comics at all. They were created purely for the toy line and the cartoon series.
A mutant warthog and a mutant rhinoceros. And while they were physically powerful, they were universally portrayed as just comically inept foils.
Dangerously powerful, but dumb as rocks.
Exactly. This pair, along with the Foot Clan being replaced by robotic ninjas, drastically softened the threat posed by the villains. If Shredder's main enforcers are lovable buffoons who constantly fail, the stakes are significantly lower for the audience.
And let's not forget Baxter Stockman, whose backstory underwent a major rewrite, including a race lift that has been widely noted in the source material.
A pretty significant one.
Oh.
In the original Mirage comics, he was a dark-haired African-American scientist, a real sociopath.
And in the 1987 cartoon, he was depicted as a white inventor who allied with Shredder after his Mouser robots were rejected by Ajax Pest Control, a sort of bumbling, rejected genius.
And his eventual mutation is classic B-movie horror that fits the new goofy tone.
Yeah.
He was later mutated into a humanoid fly after an accident involving a disintegrator unit and, well, a fly.
This change served several purposes, didn't it? It provided a new, visually distinct mutant character for the toy shelves.
And it completely divorced him from his original, darker comic book context. It was a total reset.
A massive revision of continuity done explicitly for commercial purposes. But what's interesting is that even the perpetually silly 1987 series couldn't stay consistently silly. By the end of its run, it tried to recapture some of that original darkness.
The Red Sky seasons 8 through 10.
Yeah, what was going on there?
This was a desperate attempt to stay relevant as children's action programming became more serious in the early 90s, with shows like Batman, the animated series.
So they had to compete.
They had to compete. The sources note a dramatic tonal shift. The humor was significantly toned down, the animation became darker and more cinematic, and the New York sky was changed to a continuous, ominous, dark red. It was a visual callback to the bleak aesthetic of the original comic.
And the villains suddenly became competent.
Yes. Shredder, Krang, Bebop, and Rocksteady went from being consistently inept to presenting a more menacing, unified threat. Shredder was now portrayed as genuinely dangerous, capable of serious strategy.
And Krang got a darker backstory, I remember.
He did. He was revealed to have seized power in Dimension X through numerous betrayals and widespread destruction, giving his character much higher, darker stakes than simply wanting to steal energy from Earth.
And then they were both replaced altogether by a new primary antagonist, Lord Dreg.
Lord Dreg, an alien warlord who represented an even greater technologically advanced threat. He even ran a sophisticated smear campaign against the Turtles, using media manipulation and propaganda to turn New York citizens against them.
Which is a surprisingly modern form of villainy for a kid's cartoon from that era.
It really was. Lord Dreg proved to be the final, definitive villain of that entire run. In the final confrontation, the Turtles ended up using Krang's android body to shrink Dreg down and banish him to Dimension X.
Signaling a definitive end to that era's villains, and shortly thereafter, the end of the long-running 1987 series itself.
And that struggle, that constant push and pull between dark roots and mass commercial appeal is perhaps most clearly visible in the theatrical film.
Oh, absolutely. They often had the impossible task of bridging the gap between the fans of the gritty comic and the huge dominant audience that only knew the cartoon.
Starting with the original live-action trilogy from 1990 to 1993. The 1990 film, directed by Steve Barron, was a massive financial success. It made, $135 million on a $13 million budget?
Something like that, yeah. And critically, it leaned heavily toward the darker, more grounded tone of the Mirage comics. It focused on the Foot Clan, not as robots, but as a violent youth delinquency syndicate.
It truly felt like a street-level martial arts film, especially compared to the cartoon that was on at the same time.
Oh, yeah. The plot dealt with serious themes of teen delinquency, theft, and gang violence. The tone was grounded. Raphael is ambushed and seriously beaten unconscious in a genuinely distressing scene.
And Splinter is kidnapped, leaving the brothers vulnerable and, adrift.
And they successfully utilized those high-quality animatronic heads supplied by Jim Henson's Creature Shop.
That was the game changer.
It lent an unparalleled emotional depth and gravitas to the physical performances.
The Henson work is so crucial because it anchored the characters in reality, despite their fantastical appearance. They had weight, they had expressive eyes. It made the serious, grounded conflict believable.
But the immediate reaction from the studio, driven by the massive toy sales of the cartoon, was to lighten up.
Immediately. Lighten next installment.
Which brings us to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles II, The Secret of the Ooze in 1991. This film saw an immediate, deliberate move toward a more lighthearted tone.
You can feel it from the first scene. The Turtles openly avoided using their weapons to strike human enemies. They were using, yo-yos and sausage links to fight.
Non-lethal objects, yeah.
Yeah.
And comedy to win fights. And this is where we get that famous creative schism that highlights the tension between art and commerce.
The Bebop and Rocksteady problem.
Exactly. Co-creator Peter Laird, disgusted by the sheer stupidity of their cartoon counterparts, objected to using Bebop and Rocksteady. He viewed their portrayal as annoying and silly to the point of being stupid.
But the producers, they needed new toy-friendly mutants for the shelves. So they overrode Laird's objections by creating new characters instead, Tokka and Rahzar.
And this is where the lore goes completely off the rails into Bizarro World. I had to read this section of the source material several times to believe it.
It's insane.
Tokka, the snapping turtle, and Rahzar, the gray wolf, were abducted from the Bronx Zoo and mutated. But here's the unsettling part that shows the desperate push for silliness.
Secret ingredient.
Professor Jordan Perry secretly altered the mutagen with the DNA of human infants,
Resulting in the duo having incredibly childish personalities. They were powerful, yet they behaved like toddlers, humiliating Shredder when they called him Mama instead of Master after their mutation.
The decision to deliberately inject baby DNA into the mutagen, a highly bizarre and dark concept, all to ensure the new monsters were non-threatening and suitably comedic, it just encapsulates the commercial pressure to avoid the serious tone of the first film.
And it didn't work. The lighter tone didn't translate to greater success. The sequel only made about $78 million, significantly less than the first.
And the third film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles III, which involved time travel to feudal Japan, continued that downward trend, making only $42 million on a $21 million budget. That was the end of that cycle.
The pretty definitive end. So we fast forward over a decade to the CGI revival in 2007, the film TMNT.
The first computer-animated feature. It adopted a really unique narrative approach by consciously serving as a sequel to the original 3 films.
It did. It dealt with the emotional toll of the Turtles having defeated Shredder and now suffering from growing apart, lacking a common purpose. It's a pretty mature theme.
This provided a fantastic opportunity for character reflection. The character dynamics here are great reflections of their core archetypes breaking down under the pressure of peace. Raphael, who thrives on conflict, was secretly operating as the vigilante night watcher.
Wearing black armor, fighting crime solo, it was very Raph.
Meanwhile, Leonardo was off training in Central America, trying to find purpose. Donatello had settled for a surprisingly mundane job as IT tech support.
And Michelangelo was earning money as a children's birthday entertainer, Cowabunga Carl.
It's so sad they had lost their unity.
But the plot forced them to reunite to fight ancient evil creatures, the 13 monsters of the Yodel myth, commanded by the immortal warlord Max Winters, whose true identity was Yodel.
A completely non-Shredder-centric plot, a deliberate attempt to refresh the villain roster. And this film was also notable as the final Turtles movie distributed by Warner Bros. Before the entire franchise was purchased by Viacom in 2009.
And that acquisition by Viacom Nickelodeon ushered in the next massive reboot cycle, the live-action Platinum Dunes reboots.
2014 and 2016, produced by Michael Bay's company. These films used advanced motion capture for the Turtles and aimed for a true, modern blockbuster scale. The budgets just soared to $125 million and $135 million.
The 2014 film tried to radically redefine the Turtles' mythology, creating a more interconnected, scientifically grounded origin. Shredder and Eric Sachs were revealed to be the ones who killed April's father, Dr. O'Neill, who was working on the TCRI mutagen.
Which brought April much closer to the center of the origin story, making her the catalyst for the entire chain of events.
It's necessary to pause and detail what the TCRI mutagen represents, because it's a massive piece of lore. TCRI stands for Techno-Cosmic Research Institute, a corporation that has existed in various forms across the franchise, usually as a front for the alien neutrons.
So by making April's father a key scientist there, the film dramatically shrinks the narrative scope. The entire origin becomes a result of a lab accident, rather than a street encounter involving Hamato Yoshi.
And there's a fascinating piece of continuity aversion regarding that 2014 film that perfectly illustrates Hollywood's corporate pressures.
Oh, the video game connection.
Exactly. The video game adaptation for the Nintendo 3DS actually featured the original cut plot, where William Fichtner's character, Eric Sachs, was depicted as the Shredder. His name was an anglicized version of Oroku Saki.
So the script originally intended Sachs to be the Shredder, a huge, unprecedented retcon.
It was. But post-test screening criticisms of whitewashing the Asian villain led to emergency reshoots. They changed Sachs' dialogue and backstory to make him Shredder's adoptive son, and the Shredder himself was played by Tohru Masamune, preserving some of the original cultural context.
But the game, which was likely finalized before the reshoots, preserved the timeline the film averted.
It's a perfect encapsulation of the constant struggle to manage tone and origin story under corporate pressure.
So when the film gets criticized for one thing, the next film overcorrects. The sequel, Out of the Shadows in 2016, then went in the absolute opposite direction from the grounded tone of the 2014 film.
Oh, it fully integrated the goofiest 1987 cartoon elements. It was a massive hybridization.
That sequel brought back Bebop and Rocksteady, complete with their signature anthropomorphic looks, and they were mutated by Krang's mutagen.
Which brought the alien warlord Krang and Dimension X fully into the live-action fold. It was a lot.
They even had Donatello figure out that the mutagen could potentially turn the turtles into humans, sparking a heated philosophical debate between Raphael and Leonardo about whether they should shed their mutant identities for societal acceptance.
That film completed the tonal shift. It went from the gritty comic inspiration past the serious first film and landed squarely back in the goofy toy line inspiration, attempting to maximize nostalgia.
These narrative gymnastics, just constantly relaunching the property, meant that key characters, Splinter, Shredder, April, had to have their entire backstories ripped up and redefined every few years.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Let's look at how the subsequent animated series handled these changes, starting with the first post-cartoon reboot, the 2003 series.
Right, the 2003 animated series marked an explicit, deliberate return to Mirage comic complexity. It was often advertised as darker and edgier.
And crucially, it was co-produced by Mirage Studios and 4Kids Entertainment.
Which meant the creators had a significant stake. Mirage owned 1/3 of the rights. This allowed them to veto creative choices and push for the return of complex, darker stories.
This show focused heavily on generational conflict. It dug deep into the Splinter Yoshi origin, reintroducing the Tang Shen tragedy in Season 4 flashbacks. How does this compare to the Mirage version?
So in the 2003 version, Tang Shan fell in love with Hamato Yoshi, which caused a rift with his adopted brother and fellow ninja, Yukio Mishimi. Out of intense jealousy and hatred, Mishimi ruthlessly murdered Tang Shen in cold blood.
Which prompted Yoshi to challenge him to a duel.
Yoshi was the victor, but his pet rat, who witnessed the entire ordeal, was later named Splinter after Tang Shen due to her enduring kindness. The rat was trained by watching Yoshi practice.
It's a very heavy, character-driven origin that establishes the generational feud without making Hamato Yoshi the actual rat, a twist we'll see later.
Exactly, and the deep lore for secondary characters here is just astounding. Look at Agent Bishop's deep lore, introduced as the leader of the Shadowy Earth Protection Force, or EPF.
His backstory is perhaps the single most complex piece of retcon lore in the entire franchise.
It's pure, unadulterated pulp science fiction. Bishop's origin is that he was originally a soldier in the Civil War. He was abducted and horribly experimented on by aliens back in 1815.
Wait, 1815, nearly 50 years before the Civil War even began.
Correct. This traumatic experience led to his pathological hatred for all extraterrestrials and motivated him to found the EPF, dedicated to defending Earth against alien threats, including the Turtles, whom he often viewed as potentially hostile.
But what's fascinating is how he evolves. Despite his antagonistic nature toward the Turtles, a future version of him appears in the fast-forward season, known as President Bishop.
Acting as a friendly, pro-alien liaison for the Pan-Galactic Alliance, it proves that even the most complex, long-running villain can be redeemed through time travel and radical character growth.
And we see the Mirage continuity being consciously preserved in other characters, like the Fugitoid.
Professor Zayton Honeycutt. His 2003 origin retained the comic book roots. Struck by lightning, consciousness transferred to a robot, pursued by the Triceratons and the Federation for his teleportal device.
He even executes a dramatic self-sacrifice, infecting the Federation fleet with a computer virus, only to later return when Leatherhead builds him a new, improved body.
That dense complexity contrasts sharply with the next major era, the Nickelodeon 2012 era, which was a massive hybridization and mutation of the existing canon.
Right. This CG series had to reconcile the fun of the '87 cartoon with the complexity of the Mirage books, resulting in some truly radical rewrites.
The Splinter Shredder rift was dramatically altered again here. In this version, Hamato Yoshi is Splinter, but his past relationship with Oroku Saki, Shredder, is fundamentally different and much more immediate.
Tang Shen chose Hamato Yoshi over Oroku Saki.
And the tragic climax has changed. In vengeance, Saki staged an attack in their home that accidentally killed Tang Shen while she was defending Yoshi. But here's the crucial, massive shift.
The daughter.
In this version, Hamato Yoshi and Tang Shen had a daughter named Miwa. Miwa was found by Saki, who raised her as his own, renaming her Karai, the future Shredder protege.
This retcon does two things. It makes Shredder responsible for the death of his rival's wife, and establishes a hidden, tragic familial tie between Shredder's adopted daughter, Karai, and Splinter, who is Yoshi.
It adds a profound emotional depth the '87 cartoon never even touched.
And the radical character redefinitions continued, including the Fugitoid, who is voiced by David Tennant in this era.
Yes, and if you contrast this version with the 2003 series, his new role is far more consequential and destructive. He was a scientist whose body was destroyed by the Triceratons after refusing to make weapons for them, leading to his brain being placed in his robotic assistant.
But the kicker is that he was directly responsible for the biggest catastrophe in the universe.
He created the black hole generator, the mechanism that eventually destroyed Earth. He unknowingly sold the components to the Krang.
So after Earth is destroyed, he is forced to use his technological prowess to turn back time, 6 months, to prevent the catastrophe. He becomes a universe-altering character.
The sheer scale of that retcon is just astounding.
Then we have the radical mutant reboots for characters like Tokka and Rahzar, who were invented in the 90s film to avoid using Bebop and Rocksteady.
In the 2012 series, they are given completely different, independent, and sometimes darker origins.
Rahzar is introduced first as Chris Bradford, a celebrity martial arts star and Shredder's pupil.
Right. And after numerous failures against the Turtles, he is doused with mutagen and mutates into a large, bipedal wolf-like creature dubbed Rahzar by Michelangelo. He's a tragic figure, consumed by rage and loyalty to Shredder.
But Tokka, the snapping turtle, is radically redefined.
Completely. She is Tokka Picasso, a monstrous, massive female alien turtle who is assigned by the Utrums to guard a piece of the black hole generator. She's a giant kaiju threat in the series.
So the only relationship between these two versions and their movie counterparts is the names. They are completely divorced in their backstories.
And we have to talk about April O'Neil. In the Mirage comics, her father was an antique dealer, and she was, in one early continuity, born when her father brought his ink pen drawing to life using a strange crystal. It's weird.
So weird. But in the 2012 series, we get April O'Neil's hybridity.
Her mother was experimented on by the Krang while pregnant, resulting in April being born a human-Krang hybrid possessing latent psychic abilities.
Wait, so she's half alien. This wasn't just about her being an ally. She was fundamentally tied to the entire mutant and alien war.
Exactly. This grants her premonition and telekinesis, giving her actual combat utility beyond merely reporting on the news or being an assistant. It makes her a central figure in the mutant struggle, rather than a civilian who just happens to know them.
That is a truly unprecedented retcon.
It guarantees her relevance in the inevitable massive battles. It transforms her from the damsel in distress archetype into a full-fledged member of the fighting team, reflecting a major shift in how female characters are utilized in modern comic adaptations.
Finally, let's look at the most recent cinematic interpretation, the Mutant Mayhem reimagining from 2023. Producers Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg.
This series adopted a distinct youthful tone and a uniquely modern aesthetic.
The defining element here is the stylized CG animation. The director wanted the film to look like something drawn by a teenage artist. Raw, immediate, and full of chaotic energy.
The sketchbook look. It was characterized by exaggerated features and unexpected spikes and effect lines. They explicitly called it their North Star, similar to how Spider-Verse used a classic comic book aesthetic.
And the cinematography reinforced this. They opted for a close, handheld cinema verite style when focusing on the Turtles to reflect them being perpetually on the run and getting into trouble, mirroring the chaos of teen life.
In contrast, they used a much more formal, steadier camera language for the adult world, influenced by early Paul Thomas Anderson. The camera would be very formal and still during, for example, Splinter's reprimands, a clear visual dichotomy.
And the villains were also creatively redefined, continuing the trend of avoiding the traditional Shredder narrative.
Shredder was intentionally written out as the main villain in favor of Superfly, a mutant fly. The writers noted this was a deliberate choice. They wanted a mutant antagonist who could directly relate to the Turtles' desire to be accepted by humans,
providing a more immediate thematic foil.
Exactly. Superfly was initially conceived as a mutated Baxter Stockman, but the writers realized they could explore more creative freedom by splitting them into separate characters.
Superfly, voiced by Ice Cube, then assembled a huge new lineup of integrated mutants who felt like a twisted, dark version of the Turtles' own found family.
Rocksteady, Bebop, Leatherhead, who was designed to look like a realistic bipedal alligator wingnut, a highly stylized bat, and Mondo Gecko, a whole crew.
And even Splinter got a significant update, voiced by Jackie Chan. In this version, he's explicitly depicted as a mutant rat who is never Hamato Yoshi.
Right. He's the Turtles' adoptive father and mentor, having taught them martial arts by watching instructional DVDs in the sewer. The theme here is less about ancient ninja feuds and revenge, and entirely about a found family struggling to raise 4 highly energetic, rebellious teenage boys.
So as we conclude our exploration of these evolutionary cycles, we have to touch briefly on the periphery and the failed reboots.
The projects that tried radical new directions that the audience or creators simply wouldn't accept. They provide context for what not to do with the franchise.
And the most famous example has to be the short-lived live-action TV series Ninja Turtles, The Next Mutation.
1997 to 1998, produced by Saban Entertainment, the company behind Power Rangers. This series is infamous among fans and creators alike for the introduction of Venus de Milo.
Venus was the first female turtle created specifically for that iteration, and she represented a massive, fundamental deviation from the core canon.
She utilized ancient shamanistic magic instead of ninjutsu, replacing the core martial arts theme with a mystical element. He just didn't fit this.
And it failed spectacularly. Peter Laird later expressed profound regret over this project, noting it was the only TMNT endeavor he truly regretted.
Its failure caused a major hiatus in live-action media until the 2014 reboot. It proved that while you can change the tone and the villain origins, you cannot fundamentally alter the core structure of the team or their foundational method of combat.
Now contrast that failure with the modern IDW comic model, which began in 2011 and has successfully expanded the universe while respecting and often integrating the core concept.
The IDW series is the true current nexus of turtle continuity. It's essentially a grand unification theory for the franchise.
How so?
It successfully integrates elements from the Mirage origins, the '87 cartoon, and new concepts into a cohesive timeline. They created fascinating new mutant characters who operate within a complex, continuous narrative, demonstrating how to innovate without violating the core themes.
Give us some specific examples of this successful expansion. Who are some of the key IDW original mutants?
The standout is Old Hob, a bitter mutant alley cat terrorist. He was mutated immediately after the Turtles and Splinter, saw the way humans treated mutants, and became a militant leader fighting for mutant kind.
He's an intense, morally ambiguous character who formed his own version of the mutanimals, often pitting him directly against the Turtles' more moderate stance.
That character is so critical because he acts as a moral mirror for the Turtles, showing them what they could become if they embrace hate.
Exactly.
Other notable additions are Koya, a mutant brown falcon who serves Shredder, and Bludgeon, a mutant hammerhead shark who later finds enlightenment and becomes a self-taught mystic.
And the IDW run also became the breeding ground for one of the most serious and commercially successful non-Viacom projects, The Last Ronin,
which has a video game in development now. It revisits the grim, violent tone of the early Mirage books by focusing on a single surviving turtle seeking vengeance in a dystopian future. The IDW series proved that a complex, dark narrative could still resonate powerfully with the modern audience, provided it's built on a foundation of genuine character drama.
So, after 40 years of tonal whiplash, commercial shifts, and mythological overhauls, what truly is the enduring core of the franchise? What keeps these four mutant brothers relevant across multiple generations?
Well, I think it boils down to the narrative resilience of the concept. First, the incredible adaptability.
Right. The core concept, mutant ninja brothers fighting evil from the sewers, is incredibly elastic. It can successfully shift between being serious and gritty, like Mirage or The Last Ronin,
and lighthearted and comedic, like the '87 series or the recent Mutant Mayhem. This allows the franchise to constantly reinvent itself for new generations and evolving tastes without losing its essence. It's a template that can accommodate any genre.
And the second factor has to be the set of universal themes that resonate across every single version.
The profound importance of found family, unconditional loyalty, teamwork above ego, and the struggle of outcasts finding strength and purpose in unity.
And we cannot overlook the crossover ecosystem that continuously renews fan interest and validates the entire history of the brand.
Oh, the multiverse. The 2009 television film Turtles Forever explicitly established a unique multiverse concept when the darker 2003 Turtles teamed up with their goofier 1987 animated counterparts to fight the Utrum Shredder.
That film made every version canonical, paving the way for endless possibilities.
And the franchise loves to cross dimensions. It has deep connections with characters like Miyamoto Usagi from Usagi Yojimbo dating back to the Mirage days, and in the IDW comics, even massive successful crossovers with the Batman universe and the Power Rangers.
It's a universe that validates the existence of every single version simultaneously, from the darkest, bloodiest comic book to the silliest, most commercial cartoon. That validation of the multiverse keeps the property fresh.
Okay, let's unpack this synthesis. The deep dive into the TMNT confirms a fascinating, perpetual tension at the heart of the property.
On one hand, you have the necessity of radically softening the original dark tone for massive commercial success, which the 1987 cartoon delivered to the tune of $1.1 billion in toy sales.
And on the other, you have the periodic need to recenter on those darker, more complex, character-driven roots, which we saw in the 2003 series and in projects like The Last Ronin.
The brand's incredible resilience lies precisely in its willingness to radically redefine everything around the core four brothers to suit the demands of the era and the medium. They are narrative chameleons.
They really are. They started as a violent parody, evolved into a massive cash cow, and continue to thrive by cycling through their own past identities.
We've seen Shredder go from a deadly, vengeance-driven syndicate leader in the comics to a comically inept alien sidekick, only to be resurrected as a serious threat.
And then even replaced by a complex mutant fly antagonist in the most recent film, all in the service of keeping the stories fresh and marketable to different demographics.
The ultimate synthesis here is that appreciating the TMNT franchise isn't about adhering strictly to one canonical version, but understanding the complex narrative gymnastics required to keep these sewer-dwelling martial artists relevant for new audiences without betraying the core themes of brotherhood and loyalty.
And here's where it gets really interesting, and a final thought for you to consider as you wrap up this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
Despite all the constant shifts in tone and mythology, the Shredder changes, the April origins, the varying levels of violence, the source material shows that the brotherly bond between Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo is the single most consistent and defining element.
It's the one thing that never really changes.
It's the immutable constant. So we've seen how commercially successful the toy line was, and how often villains and origins are retooled for marketability.
Right.
Given that the brotherly bond is the constant, you have to consider whether the constant rebooting and radical redefinition of secondary characters like Shredder, Splinter, and April O'Neil is driven primarily by genuine creative curiosity to explore new narratives, or the relentless commercial need to perpetually restock a massive multi-billion-dollar toy pipeline with new, fresh origins and character forms that encourage new purchases.
That is the true shell game the franchise plays.